Hello, my name is Tanya McKeever. I work with SP Angel Corporate Finance in London as a special situations analyst. One of the companies I follow is TekCapital. It's an investment company listed on the AIM market of the London Stock Exchange. I've got Harald Braun with me this afternoon, the executive chairman from Guident. Guident is one of Tek's portfolio companies. Good afternoon, Harald. Thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon, Tanya.
Can you tell me a bit about yourself and about what Guident is focused on?
Yes. So myself, I was a previous president CEO of Siemens Networks in the US, and before handled the telecommunication business for Siemens in Southeast Asia. And just recently, 2018, we founded a company which is called Guident. And Guident improves the safety and the adoption of autonomous vehicles. We develop a platform, a software platform, utilizing artificial intelligence algorithm and also some interesting connectivity concepts to make sure that we have a safe interaction with AVs in the future.
Great. So there's been a lot of news from Guident lately in terms of building the management team and the scientific advisory board. And I guess it strengthens the expertise at the company. Can you talk a bit about how this helps to evolve the company and its strategy and what it actually means for Guident?
You can imagine that this is a complex area, and somehow it's also a new evolving industry, a very fast evolving industry. And we have to act in a kind of ecosystem, which requires a lot of partners, whether these are AV manufacturers, whether these are autonomous vehicle fleet operators, and all sorts of companies. And since we have now developed 7 patents, we have strengthened our science advisory board with some really very high-level names in the academia. But we have also a very good board, which has expertise in telecommunication, but they have also expertise in on-demand businesses and also in the automotive industry. You see the names with Johan Denischen and Dan Grossman, so they are industry captains in that field. So we have really developed a very good board of directors and also a very good science advisory board with some meaningful professors in the US. On top of this, of course, we have hired some very good talented people in the software industry. So that gives Guident a really good 360-degree kind of people asset. And I think with that we are very good settled, to conquer this industry.
Sounds good. You've also announced some strategic alliances recently. There's one with Cirrus Core Networks and then another one with a company called Best Mile. Can you tell me about each of these partnerships and then tell me how they benefit Guident and its strategy?
As I mentioned before, we need in this new asset class of autonomous vehicles and land-based drones, we need partners. We need an ecosystem. We build an ecosystem. We need to build an ecosystem. One critical part of the ecosystem is that we have companies like Best Mile, a Switzerland-based company, which focused at the moment on monitoring of autonomous vehicles and orchestration about autonomous vehicles. This is one part. What was missing on their side was the control or the teleoperation of autonomous vehicles, which we can provide. So it's a perfect match, having control and teleoperation together with monitoring, orchestration capabilities, all software-based, by the way, and that monitoring in what we call a remote monitoring and control center. So that's one portion. The second portion is we have to have secured, safe, reliable, redundant, low latency connectivity to mobile devices. And I call an AV a mobile device on wheels. And so we have to have mobile connectivity, and Cirrus Core Networks provides a very unique approach which we can integrate in our software to have very low latency, redundant capabilities for us to connect to AV. So it's very, very important.
So just for the less technologically inclined, can you just explain what you mean by low latency connectivity?
Yes, low latency means, and of course, when we have, everybody might have heard that a 5G network, which is the evolution of the current 4G network, and a lot of people are talking about already about the 6G network. So in a 5G network, a lot of people, but also a lot of sensors are talking to each other. It is very important in our industry that when I have when I send a data point from a car, for example, a moving device, to the cloud to compute something. Let's say I want to go in the next, on this street, on this crossing, I want to go right. And there is an issue going right. And we have evidence that there is an issue. It needs to be very, very clear and very, very fast to come from computing cloud, which is in a central office, to that vehicle. That means latency is in principle a timing difference between sending an impulse and receiving it back. So a ping, sending a ping, getting a ping back. That time interval is called latency. And in our case, it reacts to a distance. So when I have a long latency and I'm waiting for a result, in that time, the car or this vehicle did already move. That means time relates to distance. And of course, we need to make sure that the latency is very, very low, so that that is almost real time. So no latency would be real time. Maybe that's a better expression, you know?
Yep, that makes sense. And that's constant connectivity, because if you ever dropped a connection, I guess you'd be in big trouble with an AV.
Yes, and it's not only in our industry, it's also in the healthcare industry when you have robotic surgery. So somebody doing surgery in South Africa on a patient in the US, well, it needs to be almost real time, right, with low latency.
Absolutely, that makes sense. So, I mean, that takes us to my next question. It's, you know, this is obviously a business that requires a large amount of intellectual property. Can you speak to your IP portfolio and perhaps tell me a bit more about your recent acquisition of regenerative shock absorber technology?
Yes, so we have a portfolio right now of 7 patents. And this, of course, for a company which is just, let's say, active since 2018, is already a sizable product portfolio, or patent portfolio, sorry. And this patent portfolio, of course, covers exactly that what we wanted to focus on in the industry. So in the industry, there are notions of vehicle to vehicle safety use cases, vehicle to network, which is a communication network, vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian. So all the interaction with your environment. So we have covered that with patents. And then we covered this also with artificial intelligence, meaning that we take all the data points which are existing in the cloud, in the network. We are considering that in our algorithms to make better choices for an autonomous vehicle. So think about that there is nobody in the car. So the car needs to make decisions. And the decisions come from computing power in the cloud. And of course, from all the data points which are there. So we have written some of the patents there in describing the methods and the systems for remote monitoring and control of autonomous vehicles. In addition, we have we acquired actually one patent which is for regenerative shock absorbers. And that is that a shock absorber is creating, through movement, creates energy. And you can imagine that we use or need energy to power our computing power in a vehicle, whether that is to power up the video or the cameras or the computers in the car. So we need every bit of energy, and regenerative shock absorbers can either, charge a battery. On the other side, it can also be used to use the electricity to power up computers in the car. So therefore, we acquired that. So it's a nice extension in our patent portfolio.
Definitely related. I mean, conceptually, I think everyone sort of has an idea of what autonomous vehicles are and what they might look like. Can you tell me what your thoughts on and how all this fits together, and chat a bit more about the core technologies and services being developed by Guident? What part of it are you guys actually working on?
So Guident develops, as I mentioned before, software. Develops a software platform. And in this software platform, our first use case is to develop a remote monitoring and control center. So imagine this: there is an AV operating on a public road without a driver, and that of course is an economic benefit for fleet operators, so that there's nobody actually in the car, nobody driving it, because it's a cost benefit for them. So it's really an economic benefit for fleet operators. And out of safety reasons, and there are also laws in the US, in some states, that required actually some kind of human intervention when you operate an AV on public roads. So that means we can monitor that vehicle inside, outside. We can use artificial intelligence of that area where the car is operating. And when the car gets into a mishap situation, we can take over control of that car. So that means we monitoring it, we anticipate issues, we anticipate mishaps, and then get the autonomous vehicles, the AV, out of this mishap, taking over control, get it back where it belongs, so to say, right? And then yield control back to the vehicle so that it can continue. So in principle, you have monitoring and a control over the vehicle, and we're monitoring it. And you can imagine we need operators for that. But the operator is not in the car, so that is a business case one too many. So how many operators can actually monitor and control, if necessary, and autonomous vehicles? That is in our business case. And of course, this is in the discussions, you know, what N is, 1 to N, you know, so one driver to many vehicles.
Still being developed. Interesting. So who's your target customer? Is it the automotive companies, or is it the cities rolling out the technology?
Yeah, the good news is that there are many. So there's not that one customer. So there is on one side the AV manufacturers. You are correct. That is one target market. And what we see so far, they are focused on their development of AVs. That's their core business, to develop AVs. That's complex enough. And they have not thought all of them through, let's say, a vertical integration. What is actually needed to operate an AV on the streets, right? So they are just focusing on AV and the vertical integration of, do we need the charging stations out there? Where do we need them? Do we need monitoring concepts, and so on and so forth, right? So that we play a role there. That's one thing. Second is the AV fleet operators. So imagine this: there is an area of a city, and this area, wants to have people movers, or they want to have delivery services, and the city, would then go to fleet operators and say, okay, I want delivery services. We call that zero-touch deliveries. That is our first use case, by the way. And that, of course, through the pandemic, this got a spike in interest, and they come then and say, well, we need also to make sure that we know where this vehicle is, and that we can also take over control in case it gets into a difficult situation. So, fleet operator is, or fleet operators is another area of our target market. There's another one which we see more and more coming up. Cities are developing since years their smart city concepts. And one part of the smart city concept, and that has also to do with connectivity, is how can we do delivery, zero-touch delivery, without anybody into that robot or car or AV or drone, whatever it is? Number two, how can we move actually people from A to B to C to D? And so smart city projects are another target market. But there are many others, and we see RFPs, requests for proposals, coming our way, which describe also how to operate autonomous vehicles and any sorts in dangerous environments where you do not want to have people in the cars or in the vehicles, like in the military, number one, or in the mining sector, or for example, on shipyards or harbors or container stations or so on and so forth. So, so there are many of those kind of use cases we are looking at. So it's not only one target market, are several target markets.
Right. And so there's an awful lot going on around the world related to AVs. And I think, the market's expected to be worth several hundred billions in the next several years. But it feels like we're still very much in the early development stages. But how do you expect this to begin to roll out? And where does Guident fit relative to the competition?
Yes, so when you follow the trends, then you see that AVs, and particularly in the US, are in some states already on the streets. And some states have regulations for that, some states don't. But so that means also that it's developing. That means that some AV manufacturers are putting their AVs on the street. So these are pilots, but this will be rapidly growing. So there will be an exponential growth, I project, in that area. And on the delivery side, you see actually already a huge push, and that was through COVID-19, that a lot of deliveries of medical supplies or also delivery of goods that they get to the end user via a robot or via a drone, land-based drone or a flying drone, so to say. You see all of this happening. So to see meaningful delivery drones and AV cars, let me put it this way, on the streets, I think would be within the next 3 years. That's what I'm projecting. And you see is about a 600 billion market for us to address. And all of them need some sort of monitoring and control. That's what we believe, and therefore we built the business case on that. And again, this is all service, this is all software, and our business case is a managed service business case. So software as a platform business case.
Is there sort of something that will mark a critical turning point for the rollout, or is there some piece that's just not quite developed yet so we can have the mass market using AVs?
Right. So one key turning point I just mentioned already was the pandemic.
Right.
And the focus on how do I get goods to people which are not in lockdown situations, which are locked at their house and cannot go out. And but there are critical critical needs for medicine. There's critical needs for food and supplies, food supplies, and they cannot go out. And that, of course, was a very important turning point for the zero-touch deliveries, how we call it. I see also down the road through the deployment of electro vehicles, which is the basis for AVs, which is the basis for autonomous vehicles. So every autonomous vehicle is an electro vehicle. So, the deployment of EVs, the next evolutionary step to that, and you see a lot of car companies already which are in the market with EVs, with electro vehicles, have their next step already and their next vision on AVs. So that will be a critical turning point. The adoption of EVs, which a couple of years ago was also something we could not think about, but now it's already common practice, I would say. And then the next logical step to go from EVs to AVs means that that is a critical turning point, and that will all happen in an accelerated speed. When you see our technology, how that evolves, it is exponential. So there's exponential growth right now, and that has to do with a lot of things, not only with computing power. So there are many industries see how they feel about exponential growth right now. And I think our area will have the same kind of growth projection.
Good. And what about geographically? You mentioned the United States. It sounds like it's, you know, moving quite quickly. Are there other regions that are first movers, or do you just see it all moving kind of as a more of a global?
There's an interesting study to this question, and the study is called the AV Readiness Index, where different countries were checked on, I think, 5 criteria. And some of the criteria was the road conditions in the country. There was the condition of the telecommunication network. There was the criteria of the government regulations in terms of progressive, right, versus conservative. There was also the notion of the venture capital industry. And that, I think that were the main criteria. So there was, they checked in the countries, and in the top 5 were Singapore, okay, the US, the UK, the Netherlands, and Germany. That were the top 5, when I recollect that correctly. But so the conditions the readiness for AVs to put on the street were in these 5 countries. And of course, we live in the US. We focus at the moment in the US, but that doesn't mean that we are not rolling it out for global access and for global distribution. So that's what we're trying to do. But the first step and the focus for a startup company is, of course, focus on a product, and then focus also on the market, and focus on the target market, and then get some customers and prove your points.
Sounds good. So just one last question, if I may. What can we expect from Guident in the short term? And are there any key milestones that are coming up?
Yes, the first key milestone is that we integrate our software, the Guident software, with the software of our technology partners or strategic partners like CCN and also Best Mile. So that is almost complete. So that will be completed this month. We're going beginning of next week in a vehicle we just bought. We integrate that in our software libraries, and then put it also into our vehicle. So that's one big step. The second big step is, of course, do the streaming and the monitoring in a public network environment and in a private LTE environment, so which is a mobile network environment. The next step is then to prove our artificial intelligence algorithms, right? Using all the data points and make sure and simulate how good decisions we can make with this remote monitoring and control center. For that, we need more partners. We need a very close interaction with professors and universities, which we have with the Florida Atlantic University here. They claim that they want to be the focus university in the US for artificial intelligence. We have we won an award with this university of we competed with 200 startup companies, and we won the most promising startup companies in Florida. So that's also there's also a press release out on this. So we have some really good interaction with the universities there. So these are the next milestones. Get the product to the market, to the road. Get it then, type it up, top it up with artificial intelligence algorithms, and then of course make proof of concept with customers. These are the next steps for the next half year to the end of 2021. But in the first quarter of 21, we want to show remote monitoring and control of a vehicle, proof of concept.
That's excellent. Sounds like a really great story, Harald. And I just want to thank you for your time this afternoon. And I look forward to watching the news flow come out of Guident. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.